Welcome back, Dave.
Yeah,
It's the Projects Academy podcast, episode 4.
it is indeed. Wow. Fourth one. How time flies.
It's my fourth cup of tea while recording a podcast.
Very good. I'm on fizzy water. Nothing but the best for me. Oh, and it's got a cap on it.
And today, if I understood your notes correctly, which I'm sure I did, we are talking about Prince 2, Managing by Exception.
Yes, indeed. It's something I've written loads of blogs on in the past, and it always seems to be not only a popular topic, but also one where new folks to Prince 2 can get a bit twisted about what exactly is it and what's going on, because it's got so many strands. So perhaps we can clarify that now in today's podcast.
Yep, I know from your email to me, you said that something had changed in the version 7 Prince 2 exam stuttery course that you're working on. But I know this has been around a long time because I just know that phrase, management by exception, that when I've been working on a lot of the website posts that you've written, I've seen that phrase come up. But even so, I don't know much about it. So give me a little helicopter view of what it is and what it means.
All right, then, just a really top-level view then. As you say, it's been around forever. It's interesting that Prince 2 method is the first one that I'm aware of that has taken management by exception and given you a bit, woven it into the fabric, so it's controlled within Prince 2, and it's done a very nice way. But management by exception is the old act I'm sure you've heard about, where you're given an assignment, off you go, and immediately you start to see some small deviations or things you need to or think you need to involve the boss. So you go knock on his door and blah, 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 and off you go. And the trouble is that can happen too many times, in which case the boss will say things like or think, well, Dave's in here every 5 minutes. I might as well run the darn thing myself, number one. The reverse could happen as well, where off you go and you're working hard, keeping your head down, being a good project manager. Things going okay, but you've got a bit off track. Maybe not your fault, but whatever. And you feel that you ought to involve the boss. So now you go and knock on his door a week or so later, and it's a bit of a crisis as he sees it. And he might say, well, why didn't you involve me sooner, Dave? We could have done something about it sooner. It wouldn't be as bad as it is now. Both of those are true, and both of those mean it's a bit my fault and it's a bit of his fault. Management by exception, then, in a nutshell, is how to use your managers or senior management's time more efficiently and effectively. At the same time, giving you both control, because you involve them directly. They need to be involved so that they can make timely decisions and we can keep the project back on track.
So is it a rule set that is governing everyone in the project, or is it a rule set that the project manager should be enforcing with everyone, if that makes any sense?
Yes. Certainly the former is the truth. Management by exception, and I'll describe it shortly, is a set level, a number of layers is the best word to use, management layers. So although I'm talking now as if I'm the project manager and I'm using management by exception, which would be true, it'll also be true that my managers would be using it, and even senior management, and even the folks that work for me. So there's different layers, which I'll explain shortly, that are involved here.
Okay. What are those layers, Dave?
Okay. Well, again, we need to refer to the latest Prince 2, the 7th edition, because now those layers are more clear. Right at the very top, you have what's known as the business layer or commissioning layer. It's that layer of management. It's above Prince 2. The executive of the project board keeps them informed, and they set the project level tolerance. Tolerance I'll come to, that's the variances that you can make from the plan. We'll talk about that shortly. Then below them, you have the project board, and they set stage level tolerances. Below that is the project manager. He works within a stage on a day-to-day management basis, and he therefore needs to keep the project within the stage tolerance that the project board has set. The project manager gives out packages of work to the specialist team. They're below, if you like, what Prince 2 calls the project management team. It ends with the team manager, and then you've got the specialist team. Prince 2 is quite right not to include them because, of course, Prince 2 is suitable for any project in any environment, and the specialist team could be anything from bricklayers to software engineers and you name it. So you've got those 3 layers, and each one will have a layer of what's known as tolerance that they must keep within.
Yeah, I've seen that. I've seen that word come up a lot in the blogs that you've written, the tolerance of these things. So when you say tolerances, is that how far you can go in each process before an alarm bell goes off? Or what's the range of the tolerance?
Yes, that's exactly it. The key here is forecast. There's nothing worse than having some tolerance set. We'll talk about that shortly again some more. And you wait until it's blown, and well, then it's blown. So now we've got a little crisis. So the key word is forecast, and it's all those layers I've talked about. They will, if they're working under a tolerance, they'll be thinking about forecasting it. They'll be thinking about escalating it the moment they can forecast that we're going to come outside of the tolerance range.
How do you measure that range then on like a project manager's side?
Well, again, if you're referring to the latest Prince 2, the 7th edition, there are 7 tolerance types. In the previous one, there was 6. The new one they've added is sustainability. It won't have escaped you or anyone else listening in that looking after the planet, making sure you act responsibly in terms of keeping the plants, etc., is huge. But sustainability is so big it affects organizations, and you'll now find when you look at large organizations, they'll almost certainly have some element of sustainability. For example, if you're making a product, how you package it, how you send it, making sure the packaging is biodegradable. There's an easy one. And in fact, United Nations has got a complete list, and I can't remember off the top of my head, of all of these sustainability areas. So sustainability is new. What are the others? There's 7. You've heard the 7th. Time, cost, quality, scope, what's in and what's not out, what's in and what's out, risk, and benefits, and sustainability. I think that's the 7. So what happens is all of those tolerances need to be stated. Now, the first thing that happens is this senior management level, the business level, will issue a mandate which triggers Prince 2. Very often, but not always, there'll be some amount of tolerance put in that. It may not be there, it might be. What will happen, of course, as the project starts to get into planning, which is in the initiation stage, when the PID, the project initiation documentation, is pulled together, then we need to get serious, and we need to know what those 7 tolerances are and the range for each of them.
So what's the range then? Does it vary for every? So what's the range? The range of sustainability is that whether how eco-friendly, or is it a switch that you're within the tolerance or you're outside the tolerance?
You're absolutely right. Each tolerance has a plus and a minus amount. That's important. And the tolerance metric, let's call it that, it depends on what you're talking about. If you're talking about time, then the metric might be days, weeks, or months, or it might be the current stage or the next stage or what have you. But it's normally within a stage as a project manager, or within a work package if you're the team manager, and the time tolerance will be in what you can measure in time. The cost in whatever monetary units you're using. Scope is what's included and what isn't. In other words, it's the products that are being created within Prince 2. And those products, you might have ones which are absolutely vital, must-haves. You've probably heard of Moscow, MOSCOW.
Yeah,
must-have, should have, could have, and won't have. Well, forget the won't have. The must-have, should have, and could haves. You could there say which products are absolutely vital and which ones you can make some adjustment on. Again, that's a deep topic, but that'll give you an understanding. And
maybe we'll go through Moscow.
Oh, that'll be an interesting one. Yes, and how it works at different levels. But for now,
does that still apply to modern day Prince 2, or just like an old methodology from something else?
It's been around as long as I have, for sure. It's seen as best practice. In fact, there's something called MOR, Management of Risk, which, much like Prince 2, is a course, education, a certification that teaches you best practice in risk. And Prince 2 uses that same best practice. So when we talk about Moscow being used, for example, how much risk can you have? How much is too much? And again, that's a deep topic, but for each of these, they have a plus or minus tolerance in sensible units, depending on what the tolerance is, as I've suggested. It can have, however, one of those two units plus or minus 0. For example, imagine you're delivering a project, a new product, and it's going to be exhibited at a trade show on the 7th of June or some such. Obviously, the plus time is 0. You can't go beyond it, otherwise you've missed the trade show, but you could come in a little early. And by the way, coming in too early is also bad, which is why tolerances have plus or minus. Because if you come in significantly early, remember that those tolerances would have been set up for the project to be funded and resources found. And if now suddenly you're saying, forget it, we don't need them in July, we finished early, some people aren't going to be very happy. So there will always be a range in terms of time of coming in too early, in cost of only spending a small amount. Well, why did you ask for so much? We could have used that elsewhere, etc. The rule is, though, that there's always a plus or minus. Sometimes one of those two could be 0, as I've just suggested, but never both. If you have something with 0 tolerance, it means it only wants you to sneeze and you're blowing tolerance and you're going upstairs and knocking on your boss's door, escalating it immediately. That would be untenable. So if you like, a little mission of mine is that senior managers, if you're listening, need to get educated a bit about how to use management by exception sensibly and use it for, just like Goldilocks, just right, so that it accurately reflects the level at which you want the folks below you to escalate it, because you maybe only have the authority to do something about it.
Excellent. Management by exception, in a nutshell. Okay, that makes a lot of sense to me. And as someone that's not a project manager, I am but a humble software developer.
Don't you listen to that.
But I see those rules coming in every day when I work with teams and management and clients and doing all that kind of stuff. The whole setting tolerances and setting deliverables, it applies in my software world just as much as it applies in any other project.
I'll bet it does. And I dare say you've met your fair share of managers, project managers or otherwise, that have told you that, you've got to get this done earlier now, and they don't give you any more money and no more resources. And they don't understand. I would just say one final thing, if I may, just finishing off, and that's when do these tolerances get set? Well, in the initiation stage, which is the first stage in a Prince 2 project, that's where the PID, the project initiation documentation, gets created. That's serious planning there. So at that moment in time, all 7 tolerances should be known about and stated. As you go into your delivery stages, where you're actually making the products, whatever the project is, the stage tolerance will be set at the same time as the project manager seeks approval for the stage plan from the project board. That's their last chance saloon. They then have to state what the tolerances are, the ranges and the types for the coming stage. And every stage is different. For example, in one stage, you might have a contract involved with a third party that's developing a piece of software. That didn't happen in the previous stage. So you can well imagine the project board will want to make sure that during stage planning time, that it reflects accurately the knowledge, the information's there, so they can set the right levels of tolerances.
Okay. I wonder why they didn't call it management by tolerance rather than management by exception.
Well, it might be because tolerance was the word that Prince dreamt up with, Prince 2, I should say, way back. I mean, I've been teaching this since 1998, 9, I think, something like that. And tolerance was around then. It wasn't so well documented and understood, but they've always used tolerance. But yes, Matt, what is exception? It means you're blowing tolerance. So your point is a good one.
Okay, excellent. Well, looking at the timing, as we were aiming for 15 minutes today, and we're at 14:30, I think we're just on the tolerance. Let's see if we can end this exactly. So we have a tolerance of 0 with this management task. How did you let me record this podcast with my collars all turned up like a street?
Do you know I wasn't
hobo?
even looking? I was just
Lucky
listening to
man.
what.
I'd always recommend never look.
Well, I think casual, smart, two good friends yakking away, coming up with good information. I hope that's what you dear subscribers are getting and liking.
I'm sure they do. Okay, well, Dave, let's wrap this up now. So I'll say good night from me, or good day from me, and you can say whatever you like.
Well, it's bye-bye from me for now. See you next time. Don't forget, by the way, to give us any ideas for what you'd like to hear us talk about on the next podcast.
Very good point. Yeah, very good point. If there's anything that you'd like Dave to talk about or a particular subject, we're always looking things. We try and do one of these at least once a week. I'd like to move it to twice a week. We've responded to a couple of questions that have been left by people in comments, but the easiest way is go to the website, Projex, Projex.com, click on the support button on the menu or help desk, and just leave a ticket. It hasn't got to be a problem. You just say, hey, saw the podcast. Please describe X, Y, Z, or whatever it is you want us to talk about. Dave will have a look and promise to get back to you. Even if we don't want to talk about it, we'll still mention it and talk about why we don't want to talk about it. But most likely we're always going to cover anything in any project management methodology. Dave's primo speciality is Prince 2, of course, but we cover everything, as you'll see from the courses on the website. Anything you want us to talk about, please give it to us. We'd love to have a yarn. And
well said.
With that end blather, I'll call this podcast closed, and thank you, and see you next time. Thanks, Dave.
Bye for now.
Cheers. Bye.